where faith, inspiration, and storytelling come together to bring the Bible to life like never before. Our mission is to take you on a spiritual journey through the Bible's stories, from the creation in Genesis to the revelations of the end times. Welcome to Timeless Bible Journeys.
Welcome to Timeless Bible Journeys, your destination for unraveling ancient mysteries, exploring spiritual truths, and diving deep into the timeless wisdom of Scripture. Today we're venturing into one of the most captivating and controversial topics from the Bible. Did angels really marry humans? This question has puzzled believers, theologians, and historians for generations. It's a story shrouded in mystery, rooted in Genesis 6:1-4, a passage that speaks of the sons of God taking wives from the daughters of men and producing offspring called the Nephilim, who were described as heroes and men of renown. But what does it all mean? Were these sons of God truly divine beings? Or is there another explanation hidden in the layers of ancient scripture? Whether you've heard about this before or are learning about it for the first time, this topic offers a profound look into the interplay between the human and the divine, one that sparks curiosity and invites us to question what we think we know about angels, humanity, and the supernatural world. Now, before we dive in, take a moment to support our journey. Hit that like button if you're ready to explore this fascinating story. Subscribe to Timeless Bible Journeys so you never miss an episode, and share this video with anyone you know who loves delving into ancient mysteries. And of course, we'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment below and tell us what you think about today's topic. So settle in, clear your mind, and let's begin. Let's step back in time to the ancient world, a world filled with divine encounters, mysterious unions, and questions that echo through the ages. What really happened in Genesis 6? And what does this story mean for us today? Let's find out together. The question of whether angels married humans is one of the most debated mysteries in biblical history. It stems from a brief yet deeply enigmatic passage found in Genesis 6:1, 4-4-4-4. Here we're introduced to the sons of God, the daughters of men, and their offspring, the Nephilim. These figures, described as heroes of old and men of renown, have sparked centuries of debate and speculation among theologians, scholars, and believers. To set the stage, let's read the passage. When human beings began to increase in number on the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Then the Lord said, "My spirit will not contend with humans forever, for they are mortal. Their days will be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown." Genesis 6:1, 4 NIV. This passage raises some profound questions. Who exactly were the sons of God? Were they angels, as some interpretations suggest? Or could they have been something else entirely? Who were the daughters of men? And perhaps most intriguing of all, who were the Nephilim? Were they merely human, or were they something more, something supernatural? The mystery lies in the ambiguity of the text. While the passage is brief, its implications are vast. Over the centuries, three primary interpretations have emerged to explain this puzzling story, each offering a different perspective on the identities of these figures and the nature of their union. The first, and perhaps the most fascinating, is the fallen angel's view. This interpretation suggests that the sons of God were divine beings, angels who descended to earth, took on human form, and married human women. Their union, according to this view, produced the Nephilim, extraordinary beings who stood out for their strength and heroism. The second interpretation, known as the Sethite View, takes a more grounded approach. In this view, the sons of God are understood to be the descendants of Seth, the righteous son of Adam, while the daughters of men are seen as descendants of Cain, Adam's rebellious son. This perspective sees the story as a cautionary tale of moral corruption brought about by the intermarriage of the godly with the ungodly. Finally, there's the royalty or tyrant view, a less common but still intriguing theory. According to this perspective, the sons of God were ancient kings or rulers who claimed divine status and used their power to take women as they pleased, disregarding moral boundaries and fueling societal decay. Each of these interpretations carries its own implications, challenges, and insights. And while none of them provide a definitive answer, they each shed light on the broader themes of the passage, themes of human corruption, divine boundaries, and the consequences of stepping outside of those boundaries. What makes this debate so enduring is its relevance across time and cultures. Whether we interpret the story through the lens of the supernatural, the moral, or the socio-political, it touches on universal questions about the relationship between humanity and the divine, the nature of power, and the boundaries that are meant to guide us. So, why does this story matter today? Because it challenges us to think deeply about the mysteries of our world, both seen and unseen. It reminds us that the ancient texts are not just historical artifacts. They are living narratives that continue to inspire, provoke, and guide us as we seek to understand our place in the universe. Fallen Angels Interpretation. One of the most compelling and widely discussed interpretations of Genesis 6:01-4 is the fallen angels' view. According to this perspective, the sons of God mentioned in the passage were not human beings, but divine or supernatural entities. Angels who rebelled against their heavenly nature, descended to earth, and engaged in forbidden relationships with human women. This view draws its strength from the way the term sons of God is used elsewhere in the Old Testament. In books like Job 1:6 and Job 2:01, the Hebrew term Bene Elohim is consistently used to describe heavenly beings, angels, who stand before God. If we apply the same interpretation here, it suggests that these were not ordinary men, but divine beings who stepped out of their proper domain to pursue human desires. But why would angels, spiritual, non-physical beings, do such a thing? For answers, we turn to ancient Jewish texts, particularly the Book of Enoch. Though not part of the canonical Bible for most traditions, the Book of Enoch expands on the Genesis account in vivid detail. It describes how a group of angels, called the Watchers, descended to earth, lusted after human women, and took them as wives. These unions, according to the text, produced offspring known as the Nephilim, giants or mighty beings with extraordinary powers. Here's an excerpt from the Book of Enoch. "And it came to pass, when the children of men had multiplied, that in those days were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. And the angels, the children of the heaven, saw and lusted after them, and said to one another, Come, let us choose us wives from among the children of men, and beget us children." Book of Enoch, chapter 6. This ancient text not only supports the idea of angelic beings intermingling with humans, but also attributes significant consequences to their actions. According to the Book of Enoch, the union of angels and humans introduced corruption, violence, and chaos into the world. It suggests that the Nephilim, born from these unions, became powerful and destructive, leading to widespread moral decay that ultimately resulted in God's decision to send the great flood to cleanse the earth. The New Testament appears to allude to this interpretation as well. In Jude 6-7 we read, "And the angels who did not keep their positions of authority but abandoned their proper dwelling, these he has kept in darkness, bound with everlasting chains for judgment on the great day. Similarly, 2 Peter 2:4-5 states, "For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but sent them to hell, putting them in chains of darkness to be held for judgment, if he did not spare the ancient world when he brought the flood on its ungodly people, but protected Noah, a preacher of righteousness, and 7 others." Both passages seem to reference a specific group of angels who sinned by abandoning their assigned roles and engaging in acts that led to their downfall. While not explicitly naming the events of Genesis 6, the connection is difficult to ignore. However, this interpretation raises some significant theological and metaphysical questions. First, Jesus himself stated in Matthew 22:30 that angels neither marry nor are given in marriage. This has led many to argue that angels, as spiritual beings, do not possess the physical capacity or the desire to reproduce. If this is the case, how could they engage in such unions with human women? Some proponents of the fallen angels' view counter this by suggesting that angels, as divine beings, have the ability to take on physical forms, as seen in other biblical accounts where angels appear as men, Genesis 18:1-8. Another challenge is the question of biological compatibility. How could spiritual beings and humans produce offspring? While this might seem impossible from a modern scientific perspective, proponents argue that the union could involve a supernatural element beyond human comprehension, an act that defied the natural order, which may explain why it was viewed as such a grave transgression. Despite these challenges, the fallen angel's view remains a captivating explanation for Genesis 6:1 and 4. It highlights themes of rebellion, the consequences of stepping outside divine boundaries, and the far-reaching effects of sin. This interpretation also emphasizes the deep fascination ancient cultures had with the supernatural, and their desire to explain the origins of evil and corruption in the world. The story of the fallen angels and the Nephilim is not just a tale of mystery. It's a story that echoes humanity's eternal struggle with temptation, power, and the consequences of moral failure. Whether you see this interpretation as literal, symbolic, or a mix of both, it serves as a reminder of the complex relationship between the divine and the human, and the boundaries that are meant to guide us. The Sethite View. The Sethite View is another prominent interpretation of Genesis 6:1-4. Unlike the supernatural perspective of the fallen angel's view, this interpretation grounds the story in human lineage and moral behavior. According to the Sethite view, the sons of God were not divine beings, but rather the descendants of Seth, Adam's third son, who followed a righteous path. The daughters of men, on the other hand, were understood to be the descendants of Cain, the son of Adam, who committed the first murder and was associated with wickedness. This view interprets Genesis 6:1-4 as a cautionary tale about the consequences of moral compromise. The union of Seth's godly lineage with Cain's ungodly lineage is seen as a turning point, a moment when the boundaries between righteousness and wickedness blurred, leading to widespread corruption and divine judgment. Why the Sethite view emerged. This interpretation finds support in other parts of the Bible where the term sons of God is used figuratively to refer to righteous individuals. For instance, Deuteronomy 14:1 describes the Israelites as sons of the Lord your God, emphasizing their covenant relationship with God. Similarly, in the New Testament, believers are often referred to as children of God. Proponents of the Sethite view argue that Genesis 6 uses this terminology in a similar way to distinguish the godly descendants of Seth from the ungodly descendants of Cain. The central idea is that the intermarriage between these two groups, righteous men and unrighteous women, led to moral decay. By abandoning their spiritual values and marrying into Cain's lineage, the descendants of Seth were corrupted. This aligns with a broader biblical theme. When the people of God intermingle with those who reject Him, the result is often spiritual compromise and moral failure. Strengths of the Sethite view. 1. Moral and covenant perspective. The Sethite view reinforces a key biblical message about faithfulness to God. It warns against forming close ties, whether through marriage or other relationships, with those who do not share a commitment to righteousness. This interpretation ties the story to themes that resonate throughout Scripture. From warnings about intermarriage in the Old Testament, Deuteronomy 7:3-4, to the New Testament encouragement to remain spiritually unequally yoked, 2 Corinthians 6:14. 2. Focus on human responsibility. Unlike the fallen angels' view, which attributes the events of Genesis 6 to supernatural beings, the Sethite view focuses entirely on human actions and choices. It presents the story as a reflection of humanity's tendency to stray from God's path, emphasizing the role of free will and moral accountability. 3. Theological consistency. This interpretation avoids the theological challenges posed by the fallen angels' view, particularly the question of whether angels can marry or reproduce. By keeping the narrative within the realm of human behavior, the Sethite view aligns more closely with the Bible's broader teachings on human sin and divine judgment. Challenges to the Sethite view. While the Sethite view offers a grounded and theologically consistent explanation, it faces several criticisms. 1. The use of the term sons of God. Critics argue that the term Bene Elohim, sons of God, in Genesis 6:1-4, is rarely if ever used in the Old Testament to describe humans. Instead, it typically refers to divine beings, as seen in Job 1:6 and Job chapter 2:1. This raises questions about whether the term could suddenly take on a different meaning in this passage. 2. The nature of the Nephilim. One of the most significant challenges to the Sethite view is the mention of the Nephilim. Described as heroes of old, men of renown, the Nephilim seem to possess extraordinary characteristics that go beyond what we would expect from ordinary human offspring. If the story is simply about the intermarriage of two human lineages, how do we account for the supernatural or larger-than-life nature of the Nephilim? 3. Textual context. The narrative structure and tone of Genesis 6:1-4 suggests something extraordinary is taking place. Critics of the Sethite view argue that the text's emphasis on the sons of God and their union with the daughters of men implies a more dramatic event than mere intermarriage between two human groups. Implications of the Sethite view. Despite these challenges, the Sethite view offers a powerful moral lesson. It highlights the dangers of compromise and the importance of maintaining spiritual integrity. By presenting the story as a human struggle rather than a supernatural event, this interpretation invites readers to reflect on their own choices and relationships. The Sethite view also underscores the ripple effects of moral failure. When the descendants of Seth abandoned their commitment to God, their actions contributed to a larger pattern of corruption that eventually led to the Great Flood. This serves as a reminder of the far-reaching consequences of our decisions, not just for ourselves, but for the world around us. Ultimately, the Sethite view emphasizes the tension between righteousness and sin, a theme that resonates throughout Scripture. Whether or not this interpretation fully explains Genesis 6:1-4, it challenges us to consider the importance of staying true to our values, even when faced with temptation. So, is the Sethite view the definitive answer? Perhaps not. But it offers a meaningful perspective, one rooted in morality, covenant, and the enduring struggle to live in harmony with God's will. The royalty or tyrant view. The royalty or tyrant view offers a more human-centric and socio-political interpretation of Genesis 6:1-4. According to this perspective, the sons of God were not divine beings or descendants of Seth, but rather powerful kings, rulers, or tyrants who claim divine authority and exercise their power over the people. These rulers are thought to have taken women, the daughters of men, into their harems at will, further fueling the moral and societal corruption that led to God's judgment through the flood. The historical and cultural context. This interpretation draws heavily on the historical practices of ancient Near Eastern cultures, where rulers were often viewed as semi-divine or claimed divine status to legitimize their authority. Kings in Mesopotamian, Egyptian, and Canaanite societies often portrayed themselves as chosen by the gods, or even as gods themselves. By framing the sons of God as such rulers, this view aligns the Genesis passage with known historical realities of the ancient world. The reference to the daughters of men is seen as emphasizing the widespread abuse of power. These rulers, claiming divine privilege, took women as they pleased, disregarding consent, morality, and societal boundaries. This act of unchecked authority is reflective of a pattern seen in other parts of Scripture, where leaders who stray from God's ways bring corruption and chaos to their people. Supporting the royalty or tyrant view. 1. Historical precedent for divine kingship. The idea of kings being referred to as sons of God is not unique to the Bible. In many ancient cultures, kings were believed to be descended from the gods or chosen by them. In some interpretations, this term could metaphorically refer to these rulers who claimed divine authority but acted in opposition to God's moral standards. 2. Abuse of power and corruption. Genesis 6:02 states that the sons of God took wives from the daughters of men as they chose. The language suggests an arbitrary and oppressive exercise of power, reflecting the actions of tyrants who acted without regard for justice or morality. This aligns with the broader biblical theme of human rulers exploiting their positions of authority, a pattern that often invites divine judgment. 3. Focus on societal decay. The royalty or tyrant view interprets the story as a commentary on the societal corruption caused by immoral leadership. By taking multiple wives and ruling with unchecked power, these kings contributed to a culture of violence, injustice, and oppression. The Nephilim, described as heroes of old, men of renown, are interpreted as warriors or champions associated with these rulers, further symbolizing the decay of moral and societal structures. Challenges to the royalty or tyrant view. While the royalty or tyrant view offers a grounded and historical explanation, it faces several challenges. 1. The term sons of God. Critics argue that the term B'nai Elohim, sons of God, is not typically used to describe human rulers in the Old Testament. Instead, it is more commonly associated with divine or angelic beings, as seen in Job 1:2-6 and Job 2:01. This raises questions about whether the term could legitimately apply to human kings in this context. 2. The Nephilim's supernatural element. The presence of the Nephilim in Genesis 6:04 complicates the royalty view. These figures are described as heroes of old, men of renown, which suggests they were extraordinary in some way. If the story is purely about human kings and their abuse of power, how do we account for the Nephilim's seemingly supernatural or legendary qualities? 3. Lack of direct biblical evidence. While the royalty view is consistent with the historical practices of ancient cultures, it lacks direct textual evidence within the Bible to support the idea that the sons of God refers specifically to kings or rulers. This makes it less compelling than other interpretations that align more closely with the biblical text. Implications of the royalty or tyrant view. Despite its challenges, the royalty or tyrant view offers a valuable perspective on Genesis 6:01-4. It shifts the focus away from the supernatural and instead highlights the destructive consequences of human pride, power, and moral failure. By framing the sons of God as rulers who claimed divine authority but acted wickedly, This interpretation serves as a warning against the dangers of unchecked power and the moral decay it can bring to society. This view also emphasizes the role of leadership in shaping the spiritual and moral fabric of a community. When those in positions of authority stray from God's ways, their actions have ripple effects, leading to widespread corruption and eventual judgment. In this sense, the royalty view aligns with broader biblical themes about the responsibilities of leaders and the consequences of their failures, a story with modern relevance. While the royalty or tyrant view may not fully explain the complexities of Genesis 6:1 and 4, it offers lessons that remain relevant today. The story reminds us of the dangers of pride, the abuse of power, and the moral decay that can result from leadership that is disconnected from divine principles. It challenges us to reflect on the importance of accountability, humility, and justice, not just in leadership but in our own lives as well. So, were the sons of God ancient kings who claimed divine authority? It's possible. And while this interpretation may not answer every question, it adds a rich layer to our understanding of Genesis 6, reminding us that the timeless struggles of power, morality, and human nature are as relevant today as they were in the ancient world. The role of the Nephilim. One of the most puzzling and fascinating elements of Genesis 6:1 to 4 is the mention of the Nephilim. These mysterious beings are described as heroes of old, men of renown, and their role in this passage has intrigued theologians, historians, and readers for centuries. Who were the Nephilim, and why are they significant to this story? Were they merely human, or did they possess supernatural qualities? The term Nephilim comes from the Hebrew root word naphal, which means to fall. This has led some to interpret the Nephilim as fallen ones, possibly referring to their moral or spiritual corruption. Others see them as giants, a translation adopted by the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament, where the word gigantes is used. This has fueled the image of the Nephilim as towering superhuman figures who dominated the ancient world. In the context of Genesis 6, the Nephilim are described as the offspring of the union between the sons of God and the daughters of men. If the fallen angel's view is correct, this would make the Nephilim the hybrid children of divine beings and humans, possessing extraordinary strength, intelligence, or abilities. If we follow the Sethite or royalty view, the Nephilim may represent individuals who rose to power and prominence, becoming legendary figures due to their might, influence, or deeds. The idea of the Nephilim being giants is supported by other biblical passages, most notably Numbers 13:33. In this account, the Israelite spies exploring the land of Canaan report seeing the Nephilim, describing them as giants who made the Israelites feel like grasshoppers by comparison. "We saw the Nephilim there. The descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them." This description, while perhaps exaggerated due to fear, reinforces the notion that the Nephilim were larger-than-life figures, both physically and in terms of their reputation. In Genesis 6:4, we learn that the Nephilim existed both before and after the events described in the passage. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. This suggests that the Nephilim played a significant role in the pre-flood world. According to the fallen angel's view, they were part of the corruption and violence that led to God's decision to send the flood. Ancient texts like the Book of Enoch expand on this idea, portraying the Nephilim as giants who brought chaos to humanity through their immense power and influence. In this interpretation, that the Nephilim symbolize the consequences of breaking divine boundaries. Their existence, born from forbidden unions, disrupted the natural order and contributed to the moral decay of the world. For those who adopt the Sethite or royalty view, the Nephilim take on a more symbolic role. Rather than being literal giants or supernatural beings, they may represent the rise of powerful individuals, warriors, rulers, or tyrants, who gained fame for their strength and deeds. Their renown could reflect their dominance in a world where corruption and violence were becoming rampant. From this perspective, the Nephilim are not necessarily supernatural, but rather human figures who exemplify the consequences of unchecked ambition and moral compromise. They are the byproduct of a society that has strayed from God's design, serving as a warning about the dangers of power divorced from righteousness. Regardless of which interpretation you follow, the Nephilim hold a central place in the Genesis 6 narrative. Their presence emphasizes key themes. 1. Corruption and chaos. The Nephilim embody the consequences of a world that has rejected divine order. Whether they are seen as literal giants, hybrid beings, or powerful rulers, their existence represents a society consumed by moral decay, leading to God's decision to cleanse the earth with the flood. 2. The interplay of the divine and human. The story of the Nephilim blurs the line between the divine and human realms. Their origins, whether as offspring of angels and humans or as symbols of human pride and ambition, invite readers to reflect on the boundaries that separate the sacred from the profane and the consequences of crossing them. 3. Enduring mystery. The Nephilim's ambiguous nature invites ongoing curiosity and speculation. Their mention in later biblical texts, such as Numbers 13, suggests that their legacy continued to shape the imagination of ancient cultures, leaving behind a sense of awe and fear. While the exact nature of the Nephilim remains a mystery, their story offers timeless lessons. They remind us of the dangers of moral compromise and the far-reaching consequences of actions that disrupt the natural or divine order. The Nephilim serve as a warning about the destructive potential of power, pride, and ambition when they are not tempered by humility and righteousness. Ultimately, the role of the Nephilim in Genesis 6 invites us to look beyond the surface of the text and grapple with its deeper implications. Who were these heroes of old? Were they champions of virtue or symbols of humanity's fall? The answers may remain elusive, but the questions they raise continue to inspire reflection, curiosity, and a deeper appreciation for the mysteries of Scripture. Implications and modern reflections. The story of Genesis 6:01-4 is more than just a historical or theological curiosity. Whether we interpret the sons of God, the daughters of men, and the Nephilim through the lens of the fallen angel's view, the Sethite View, or the royalty view, this passage holds profound implications that continue to resonate with us today. It invites us to reflect on human nature, moral boundaries, and the consequences of crossing divine limits. At its core, this narrative is about transgression. In every interpretation, whether angels leaving their heavenly domain, the godly intermarrying with the ungodly, or rulers abusing their power, there's a recurring theme of stepping beyond established boundaries. This serves as a timeless reminder. When we ignore the limits set by divine wisdom, chaos and corruption often follow. In today's world, the temptation to cross boundaries is no less present. From ethical compromises in pursuit of success to the misuse of power for personal gain, humanity continues to struggle with the allure of stepping beyond what is right. The story challenges us to reflect on where we might be pushing limits in our own lives, and whether those choices align with God's design. The story of Genesis 6 highlights how individual or collective actions can lead to widespread consequences. In the narrative, the unions between the sons of God and the daughters of men result in corruption so severe that God decides to cleanse the earth with the great flood. This stark judgment underscores how unchecked sin can spiral out of control, affecting not just individuals but entire societies. This theme is as relevant today as it was in ancient times. From environmental crises to social injustice, we see how human decisions can create ripple effects that impact the world on a global scale. Genesis 6 encourages us to take responsibility for our choices, recognizing their potential to shape the lives of others and even the course of history. One of the most intriguing aspects of Genesis 6 is the interaction between the divine and human realms. Whether we view the sons of God as angels, godly humans, or rulers claiming divine status, the narrative points to the profound influence of the spiritual on the material. It reminds us that our actions are not isolated from higher realities. They are deeply connected to divine principles and cosmic consequences. In modern terms, this calls us to consider the spiritual dimension of our lives. Are we living in a way that acknowledges the presence and authority of the divine? Are we aligning our actions with values that transcend mere personal or worldly gain? The story invites us to approach life with humility, recognizing that we are part of a larger, sacred narrative. If we follow the royalty view, the story of Genesis 6 becomes a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power. The sons of God, interpreted as ancient rulers, used their positions to take what they wanted without regard for justice or morality. This abuse of authority contributed to a culture of corruption and oppression. In today's world, we see echoes of this in leaders who prioritize personal ambition over the well-being of those they serve. Genesis 6 challenges us to hold those in power accountable while also reflecting on how we use our own influence, no matter how small, to promote justice, compassion, and integrity. The story of the Nephilim, whether seen as literal beings or symbolic figures, represents the tension between good and evil, order and chaos. Their presence in the narrative highlights humanity's ongoing struggle to resist the forces of corruption and remain faithful to God's calling. In our own lives, this struggle is ever present. Whether it's the temptation to compromise our values, the pressure to conform to societal norms, or the challenges of standing up for what is right, we are constantly faced with choices that test our moral resolve. Genesis 6 reminds us that our decisions matter, not just for ourselves, but for the greater spiritual and social landscape. Ultimately, the story of Genesis 6 is a call to introspection. It invites us to ask, are there boundaries in my life that I am tempted to cross, and what might the consequences be? How are my choices impacting the people and world around me? Am I living in a way that acknowledges the divine and respects the moral order established by God? These questions are not just theoretical, they are deeply practical and personal. They challenge us to live with intentionality, seeking to align our actions with the values of justice, humility, and faithfulness. While the exact identities of the sons of God and the Nephilim may remain a mystery, the themes of Genesis 6 are clear and timeless. It's a story about the consequences of moral failure, the importance of boundaries, and the ripple effects of our actions. It challenges us to confront the corruption within ourselves and our societies, and to strive for a life that reflects God's goodness and wisdom. In the end, this ancient narrative reminds us that we are part of a much larger story, one in which the choices we make have eternal significance. Whether we are inspired by its moral lessons, intrigued by its mysteries, or both, Genesis 6 offers a profound opportunity to reflect on what it means to live in harmony with the divine and with one another. So, did angels really marry humans? While the answer may remain elusive, the story in Genesis 6 encourages us to reflect on the mysteries of the divine and the choices we make as humans. What are your thoughts on this ancient mystery? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed today's exploration, make sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to Timeless Bible Journeys, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next dive into the world of the Bible's timeless wisdom. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.